Pause for a moment and picture this person. Someone who, with a cynically, sickeningly self-assured smile, juggles truth, molding it into pliable clay for their immediate needs. Someone who effortlessly sidesteps any rules, mocks the conventions you hold dear, and invariably emerges unscathed, leaving behind a trail of bewilderment, a faint taste of disruption, and a deep, almost instinctive sense of injustice. They are a virtuoso of ambiguity, a chameleon of morality, a jester whose jokes wound and whose laughter echoes over a chasm where others' hopes lie buried. Perhaps you've encountered them in news reports, in the corridors of power, under the spotlight, or in the shadows of office back rooms. They might be that blogger whose biting irony incinerates everything in its path, leaving no stone unturned in dismantling accepted norms, or a politician whose promises are as ephemeral as they are charming, ensnaring the trusting until it's too late. Every appearance, every gesture of theirs evokes not just aversion, but an almost physical burning sensation, an irritation bordering on profound contempt. This isn't merely a rejection of the unfamiliar. It's something deeper, more unsettling, piercing to the bone, as if an uninvited hand has touched something sacred within you. And it is here that the boundary lies, beyond which begins a genuine, sometimes painful, yet necessary exploration. What if this overwhelming antipathy isn't merely a reaction to external evil, to someone else's imperfections? What if this image, so repulsive and disarming in its unscrupulousness, is not a distorted reflection of the world, but a grotesque, warped mirror of your own soul? Imagine that this figure, this cunning manipulator, this eternal mocker of sacred things, this master of playing without rules, is not just someone out there flickering on the periphery of your consciousness. In a distorted, wild, almost demonic form, this is a part of yourself that you once, perhaps long ago, decided to lock away in the darkest, dustiest closet of your subconscious. This is your own trickster, your inner jester, exiled, forgotten, slandered, now knocking on the door of your awareness, not through its own long silenced voice, but through a repulsive echo in another person. It's as if in childhood you locked away your most mischievous, disobedient, bold, and audacious part, and now, wild and enraged by decades of oblivion, it breaks free, taking the form of the one who evokes your greatest disgust. And the stronger your aversion, the sharper your reaction, the more powerful the lock, the deeper the suppression, the more desperate the cry of that suppressed energy. This isn't just irritation, it's the phantom pain of an amputated ability to be cunning, free, even a little dangerous, yet still self-controlled, aware of your actions and their consequences. And in this paradox, at this painful point of contact between external aversion and internal suppression, lies a great power. For at the very heart of this sharp revulsion, this almost physical rejection, lies not a judgment of another, but a deep, unspoken truth about yourself. This is not weakness, but rather a compass pointing directly to an inexhaustible source of untapped power within you. Within this suppressed, exiled part, this desecrated image of the trickster, lies not only a destructive force, but also the key to your own flexibility, your ability to adapt to a changing world, to healthy playfulness, to seeing the world from different angles, and yes, even to the capacity to consciously break outdated rules when necessary for genuine growth and the attainment of true freedom. This is not about becoming a cynic or a manipulator. It's about reclaiming the right to that part of yourself that knows how to be unpredictable, that isn't afraid to step outside the lines, that possesses a healthy dose of self-interest, audacity, and even a touch of provocativeness, but does so consciously without causing harm and instead create something new. But why does this mechanism work so flawlessly with such ruthless precision, hitting a nerve every time? Why does this particular reflection sting so fiercely, eliciting such a powerful, almost genetic resonance in your soul? To truly grasp the power of this inner mirror, to understand why its distorted image holds such sway over your emotions and reactions, we must journey into the past, to its very genesis, to that quiet, almost imperceptible yet fateful moment when the first seed of this suppression was sown, when the capacity for healthy mischief, for spontaneity, for the ability to break rather than merely follow rules, for the right to make mistakes and to possess your own unique form of audacity was outlawed within your own psyche. Our previous contemplation led us to the edge of an abyss, the one who evokes such acute repulsion in us. The cynical jester who evades consequences is not merely an external enemy, but an echo, a distorted reflection of our own exiled part. We spoke of it as a suppressed force, a capacity for audacity, spontaneity, for the ability to dance on the edge of what is permitted. But how did this vibrant, primal energy, inherent in everyone, come to be imprisoned in the shadow's dungeon? Where is that point, that invisible crossroads where the free spirit was clad in the straitjacket of shame or fear? The answer lies not in grandiose declarations, but in the whispers of childhood memories, in the barely perceptible reactions of adults, in the unspoken rules that weave an invisible web around a developing personality. Recall when you first encountered judgment for expressing what we now call the inner jester. Perhaps it happened when your childhood ambition, a pure desire to be first, was branded as selfishness or arrogance, or when healthy, instinctive aggression, the need to protect your boundaries or assert your place, was labeled bad behavior, rudeness, or even cruelty. Imagine a child engrossed in play who accidentally broke a rule, stepped outside the permitted bounds, and instead of understanding or gentle guidance, received sharp censure, a demeaning look, the feeling that you're not as you should be. In that moment, the right to make mistakes, to be spontaneous, to explore the world's boundaries was cruelly severed. Or perhaps you once dared to be vulnerable, to show your true weakness, and in return received not support but mockery, disdain, or worse, your openness was used against you. Then deep inside, the conviction arose, being myself is dangerous. My true feelings are a weakness that must not be shown. Or, as often happens, you observe someone who dared to break accepted norms, whether for freedom or pure mischief, being ostracized, ridiculed, or even punished. At that moment, your unconscious registered. The ability to break rules, to be unpredictable, to be different. This is the path to exile. It is dangerous for survival within the tribe. The step by step, brick by brick, from these micro traumas, from unspoken prohibitions and painful lessons, that part of the shadow that now holds the suppressed trickster was formed. We learned to hide our audacity, our spontaneity, our capacity for healthy rebellion, because the world taught us that manifesting these qualities was bad, shameful, dangerous, and sometimes even unworthy of love. These suppressed impulses do not vanish. They merely go underground, accumulating unexpressed energy that then manifests in the most unexpected and destructive forms, both within ourselves and through our reaction to those who dare to embody what we have suppressed within ourselves. And this energy, like an unpaid bill, demands its collection, its return to wholeness. We have already touched upon how the inner jester, this audacious and spontaneous archetype, finds itself locked in the subconscious's dungeon. But what is the nature of this dungeon, and why does it so stubbornly keep its doors closed? Jungian psychology teaches us that the shadow is not merely a repository of unacceptable qualities. It is a dynamic, living part of the psyche that has been rejected. Rejected not because it is inherently evil, but because at a certain point in life, most often in fragile childhood, its manifestations were perceived as a threat. Recall the ancient fear of exile from the tribe. For primitive humans, this meant certain death. Similarly, for a developing child's psyche, expressing qualities that provoke condemnation, ridicule, or rejection from significant adults is perceived as an existential threat, be it ambition, overly loud laughter, turbulent aggression, or even excessive vulnerability. Anything that doesn't fit into the collective or family norm is censored. We ourselves, striving for acceptance and security, become our own censors, severing uncomfortable parts and sending them into the basements of the subconscious. This is the birth of the shadow, not conscious evil, but a sacrifice for survival, for belonging. However, like any suppressed force, the shadow's energy does not disappear. It doesn't dissolve into nothingness. It merely accumulates like one unpaid bill energy. Every unexpressed desire, every suppressed feeling, every hidden impulse, it's a kind of debt that the psyche will eventually demand to be repaid. And the longer this bill remains unpaid, the higher the interest accrues. This suppressed energy seeks an outlet, and if it isn't provided a conscious, integrated path, it bursts forth chaotically and destructively. A classic example of this mechanism is brilliantly described by Robert Louis Stevenson in The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Jekyll, striving for absolute moral perfection and suppressing all his base instincts and desires, creates an alter ego, Mr. Hyde. Hyde is Jekyll's embodied shadow, his suppressed aggression, lust, and cruelty, which being exiled from the conscious self, gain their own monstrous life. The harder Jekyll tries to be saintly, the more monstrous and uncontrollable Hyde becomes, eventually completely engulfing his creator. This is not just a story of good versus evil. It is a profound metaphor for how attempting to deny and exile a part of oneself leads to its pathological flourishing and control over the entire personality. It is in such distorted reflections in those who evoke irrational repulsion in us that our inner jester, our suppressed trickster, seeks its outlet, its recognition. Now that we've touched upon the shifting substance of the shadow, which conceals our inner jester, the question inevitably arises, what forms does it take when it breaks free, or more accurately, when we project its uncontrollable energy onto the external world? Our psyche, like an ancient theater, brings onto the stage characters who seem to have no relation to us, yet whose appearance triggers a wave of irrational aversion. This is not mere antipathy. It is a deep, sometimes unbearable irritation, contempt, or even anger directed at those who dare to embody qualities we have exiled from our own consciousness. One of the most repulsive images is the soulless manipulator. They glide through life like a weightless shadow, skillfully weaving the threads of others' fates into their own pattern. Their smile is cold, their gaze piercing yet empty. They don't openly break rules but expertly circumvent them, exploiting loopholes and others' weaknesses. There is no genuine joy or sorrow in them, only a calculated game where every move is aimed at gaining advantage, be it power, recognition, or material wealth. They are a distorted reflection of our own suppressed ambition, our desire to influence, our drive for control, which was branded as selfishness or cunning. We despise them for not being ashamed to be what we have forbidden ourselves to be, audacious, unscrupulous, free from the moral shackles we've imposed on ourselves. Another archetype is the failed clown. Less dangerous than the manipulator, but no less irritating. This is someone who constantly stumbles, makes absurd mistakes, making a spectacle of themselves, yet seems to learn nothing. Their humor is flat, their attempts at originality turn into embarrassment, and their self-irony borders on self-flagellation, eliciting not laughter, but only awkwardness. We despise them for their apparent inability to grow, for their endless failures, for their desire to attract attention through destructive absurdity. In them we see our own fear of making mistakes, of being ridiculed, our inability to accept our own vulnerability and imperfection without turning them into a parody. This is our internal fear of being incompetent, uninteresting, incapable of genuine, healthy creativity. And finally, the irresponsible anarchist. This is not someone who seeks constructive change, but one who destroys for destruction's sake. They laugh at rules, ignore consequences, sow chaos and discord, offering nothing in return. Their freedom is not liberation, but license, harming not only themselves, but also those around them. They despise authority, yet are incapable of taking responsibility. We feel rage towards them for their disregard for order, for their destructive energy that seems to have no purpose other than to turn everything upside down. This is our suppressed rebellion, our desire to cast off the shackles of outdated dogmas, which we fear to express lest we destroy a familiar world, even if it has long become a prison. Allow me to offer an example that might seem familiar. In an old city lived an artist whose name I will omit. He was known less for his paintings than for his ability to resolve matters. His methods were slippery, his promises vague, and his reputation of a mix of admiration and disgust. He could broker any deal, circumvent any bureaucratic obstacle, but his services always came with an invisible price. One day he undertook to help a young architect obtain permission to construct an unusual futuristic building in the historic city center. The artist acted cunningly, using connections, insinuations, half-truths, even minor blackmail. He played on the weaknesses of officials, their greed, their vanity, and the permit was obtained. But when the building was erected, it became an object of universal hatred. It was alien, ugly, disrupting the harmony of the old city. And although the architect was happy that his project was realized, he couldn't shake the feeling that his success was tainted. The artist, having received his percentage, simply disappeared, leaving behind a trail of dissatisfaction and ruined reputations. His cold, calculating efficiency, his complete lack of moral principles provoked fits of impotent rage in many citizens. They hated him not only for his actions, but also for the fact that he brazenly displayed qualities that most of them suppressed within themselves. The ability to push through, to ignore norms, to use people as tools. All these archetypes are merely the tip of the iceberg. They are external symbols of our inner demons, those aspects of the trickster that have been rejected and driven into the shadow. Their repulsiveness in our eyes is merely a reflection of how strongly we fear acknowledging these qualities within ourselves, how deeply we have convinced ourselves of their absolute depravity. But what if, behind this repulsive mask, something else is hidden? What if in each of these vices lies a distorted yet powerful force that can be integrated and transformed? The shadows we've seen in the mirror of aversion are not merely distorted faces of others' vices. They are phantoms of our own, exiled to the basements of the psyche, not because they were inherently evil, but because their energy proved too powerful, too inconvenient for the world that shaped us. Each of these demons, which cause a shiver of revulsion in us, actually holds within it the seed of a great power, the right to manifest which we once denied ourselves. Let's look at the first, the one we've named the Soulless Manipulator. Their cold calculation, their ability to bypass obstacles, their drive for control. What is this but a perverted echo of our own desire to influence the world, to shape our reality, to enact our will? We learned to fear this power, for we saw how it wounded, how it distorted. But by exiling it into the shadow, we deprived ourselves not only of the ability to weave intrigues, but also of the right to strategic thinking, to effective leadership, to the capacity for proactive actions that change the course of events. What valuable ability did you deny yourself by exiling this vice into the shadow? Perhaps it was the right to ambition, to healthy assertiveness, to the skill of defending your interests in a complex world where passivity is often tantamount to defeat. We fear becoming those who use people, but we lose the ability to lead, to inspire, to be the architect of our own destiny. Next, the failed clown, their absurdity, their imperfection, their willingness to be laughable. This is nothing but a distorted reflection of our capacity for spontaneity, for play, for the right to make mistakes, for the vulnerability that makes us truly alive. In childhood, we were taught to be serious, flawless, always successful. And any deviation from this norm, any misstep, any awkwardness was punished with shame or condemnation. By exiling the clown into the shadow, we didn't just stop being ridiculous. We deprived ourselves of lightness of being, flexibility, the joy of experimentation, the wisdom of humility before imperfection. What valuable ability did you deny yourself? Perhaps it was the right to creative risk, to freedom from perfectionism, to unconditional self-acceptance with all your flaws, which are in fact facets of uniqueness. We fear being ridiculed, but lose the ability to laugh at ourselves, to learn from falls, and to rise with even greater strengths. And finally, the irresponsible anarchist, their rebellious spirit, their disregard for rules, their pursuit of freedom at any cost. In this, we see the threat of chaos. But within this destructive energy lies the right to autonomy, to self-determination, to the courage to challenge outdated dogmas, to destroy what has outlived its purpose to make way for the new. We fear being rejected by society, disrupting the established order, and thus suppress any inclination towards rebellion, towards asserting our boundaries? What valuable ability did you deny yourself? Likely, it was the right to true freedom, to authenticity, to the ability to say no to what suppresses your vital force, to innovation and transformation. We fear being destroyers, but lose the opportunity to be creators, capable of clearing the path for true growth. Each of these phantoms is not an enemy, but a messenger. It points to unused potential, to locked away energy, to valuable rights that we unknowingly have taken from ourselves. And as long as these forces remain in the shadow, they do not disappear. They merely assume other, sometimes painful forms of manifestation, affecting our lives from within, shaping decisions and choices that we later regret. And so we stand at the edge of an abyss where the reflection of a once locked away jester, cynic, or rebel becomes not just a foreign face, but our own executioner. The unaccepted shadow, this invisible burden we so desperately tried to cast off, does not disappear. It merely changes form, transforming into unseen chains, binding our actions, and invisible walls, separating us from our true potential. Consider, how often has your inner censor, fearing to be deemed unserious or incompetent, stifled the sprouts of your boldest ideas at their root? How many innovative breakthroughs capable of changing the world, or at least your life, remained unspoken whispers in your mind, buried under the fear of being ridiculed, branded as a failed clown? This fear, like a dense fog, envelops the mind, paralyzing the audacity without which genuine creativity is impossible. By choosing perceived safety, we lose the spark, the capacity for spontaneity, and that healthy carelessness that allows us to make mistakes and through errors find new paths. The fear of being ridiculous in the eyes of others forces us to stick to well-trodden paths, abandoning the unique route that could lead to a breakthrough. Herein lies the paradox. Striving for an ideal image, we only distance ourselves from a living, adaptive essence capable of true growth. Or take the fear of manipulating. It acts like an invisible barrier, preventing you from asserting your own interests, from negotiating, from the strategic thinking necessary in any interaction. The fear of resembling that soulless manipulator we discussed forces you to adopt a passive stance. You yield when you should insist. You remain silent when you ought to speak. You allow others to define your worth instead of asserting it yourself. This fear transforms into a chronic inability for healthy assertiveness, for the skill of influencing events rather than merely drifting with the current. The result? Unrealized ambitions, missed opportunities, a feeling of powerlessness, and the bitterness that the world seems to constantly take without giving anything in return. And what about avoiding conflict, the very thing associated with the irresponsible anarchist who disrupts foundations? This fear isn't merely a desire for peace. It's a refusal to assert personal boundaries, to engage in healthy confrontation with what is outdated or harmful. The fear of being disruptive, of being someone who disturbs the established order, leads to you becoming a hostage to others' expectations, outdated rules, or dysfunctional systems. You allow others to trample your rights because the thought of making a scene or causing problems seems unbearable. Your boundaries blur, giving way to resentment and hidden aggression, which will eventually find an outlet, but in a destructive form. It is precisely here that we approach the core question: permeating the very essence of our discussion. How does your fear of resembling the demons revealed in previous chapters compel you to make disadvantageous decisions? Are these not the decisions that strip you of the courage to take risks, to assert yourself, or to challenge stagnation? Does the desire to avoid condemnation for manipulation truly paralyze your ability for strategic planning? And does the fear of being ridiculous deprive you of creative freedom and spontaneity? An objection often arises, but I don't want to be a cynical manipulator, an irresponsible clown, or a destructive anarchist. These qualities are destructive. And that is an absolutely valid observation. The true task is not to embody these caricatured images, but to integrate their healthy manifestations. The trickster's shadow is not a call to chaos, but an invitation to mastery. Mastery of strategic thinking, which is not manipulation, but the ability to influence and negotiate honestly and effectively. Mastery of spontaneity and self-irony, which doesn't make you a failed clown, but allows you to be flexible, creative, and resilient to life's upheavals. Mastery of the healthy, dismantling of old dogmas and outdated systems, which doesn't turn you into an anarchist, but gives you the courage to be an innovator and to forge new paths. When we suppress these aspects, they manifest through us unconsciously and destructively. But when we consciously embrace them, we become their masters. The trickster, integrated into the psyche, transforms not into a demon, but into a wise jester, capable of seeing life's absurdity, navigating obstacles with humor and resourcefulness, initiating necessary changes, and preserving inner freedom. It grants us adaptability, the capacity for unconventional solutions, the ability to laugh at ourselves and the world without losing our center. This is not about becoming bad, but about becoming whole, capable of utilizing the full spectrum of human qualities for our own good and the good of those around us. And yet, this integration process is just one side of the coin. There is another shadow, far more insidious, for it conceals not what we hate, but what we admire, unconsciously projecting our brightest talents onto the external world. If until now we've explored the dusky corners of the shadow where our rejected traits, those that evoke disgust, fear, or shame, lie hidden, it's time to turn our gaze to its radiant, almost dazzling side. There exists a shadow woven not from dirt and dust, but from gold, from those qualities we do not reject, but rather exalt, idolize, consider unattainable. This is the golden shadow, the repository of our unrealized brilliance, our dormant talents that instead of claiming, we project onto external figures, turning them into idols. In the context of the trickster archetype, this projection takes on a particular sharpness. Consider those who embody the trickster in their most appealing and inspiring manifestations. The charismatic leader whose mental agility navigates any obstacle. The brilliant inventor whose audacity of thought shatters paradigms. The master of improvisation whose words are pure magic woven from spontaneity and wit. We admire their capacity for transformation, their playful boldness, their freedom from convention, and their ability to find a way out where others see only a dead end. Yet, within this admiration lies a subtle, almost imperceptible form of self-sabotage. We see their brilliance but fail to recognize in it a reflection of our own potential. We applaud their genius, yet dare not acknowledge that the seeds of this genius lie dormant within our own soil. We project onto them our capacity for wit, for bold experimentation, and for a healthy rebellion against outdated dogmas. This act of projection deprives us of access to our own resources, to that inner wisdom and playfulness that could enrich our lives, making them more flexible, adaptable, and filled with true freedom. Ask yourself a question, piercing like a ray of light through a dense forest. Which of those embodying the trickster archetype has become such a shining beacon for you? Whose mental agility, audacity, or transformative ability quickens your heart? What unrevealed or suppressed talents of your own have you unconsciously gifted to this idol? What part of your spontaneity, your sharp intellect, your capacity for playful rebellion have you entrusted to another instead of embodying it yourself? This invisible tax on your authenticity deprives you of access to your own gold mine. Awareness of this is merely the first step. The real work begins when we start gathering these scattered sparks, returning them to our own flame. For in this reclamation lies not only wholeness, but a completely new level of freedom that awaits its moment to manifest. Acknowledging the shadow, no matter how repulsive its external manifestations may seem, is just a prelude. True alchemy begins when we cease to be passive observers, prisoners of our own projections, and actively reclaim what was unconsciously given away to the world. This is not merely accepting your inner jester, but integrating it, restoring its rightful place in the hierarchy of our psyche, yet under conscious control. Imagine that all the energy that fueled the image of a soulless manipulator, a clownish loser, or an irresponsible anarchist in the external world actually belongs to you. This is your suppressed audacity, your ability to see the absurd, your yearning for freedom from conventions, your willingness to take risks, and even your vulnerability transformed into a wry smirk. Similarly, the golden shadow, that which projects your own mental agility, courage, and creativity onto external idols, awaits its return. This is not about becoming cynical or reckless, but about owning these qualities, consciously choosing when and how to manifest them and when to hold them back. The new philosophy I propose is this: all the power you have ever seen in others, both in their dazzling grandeur and in their repellent baseness, is your own, merely temporarily alienated. It awaits your outstretched hand to reclaim it. Stop being a puppet of your own unconscious impulses projected outward and become the conscious puppeteer of your inner drama. This is the path to genuine wholeness, where every element of your psyche, even the most mischievous or frightening, becomes an ally, not an enemy. And here's a simple yet powerful tool to begin this work. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Close your eyes and visualize your inner jester. Perhaps it looks like the very trickster you feel antipathy towards, or a shy clown, or a cheeky mocker. Do not try to change or judge it. Simply allow it to manifest. Now ask it, what are you trying to tell me? What is your truth? Listen, perhaps it will respond through an image, a feeling, a sudden thought, or even a silent gaze. Write down everything that comes to mind. Ask it, how can I give you healthy space to manifest in my life? The answer might be unexpected. Perhaps it's about allowing yourself more spontaneity, or learning to laugh at yourself, or honestly expressing your disagreement, or finding a creative outlet for your energy. This exercise is not a one-time action, but the beginning of a dialogue that, if maintained with patience and openness, can lead to the deepest transformations. You learn not to suppress, but to guide this turbulent flow, transforming destructive energy into creative force. Mastering this inner flexibility, the ability to dance on the edge of order and chaos, is key to adapting in an ever-changing world. However, the path to genuine self-knowledge does not end with the jester's shadow alone. There are other equally ancient and powerful archetypes whose voices await their turn to be heard, whose lessons promise to unveil new facets of our boundless inner cosmos, each uniquely shaping the fabric of our reality and